It's 3:07 a.m. You're wide awake, staring at the ceiling, for absolutely no reason you can identify. And if you've ever searched why this happens, you've probably run into some version of this explanation. Your ancient ancestors used to wake up in the middle of the night to check for predators around the fire. And that instinct is still buried in your DNA. It's a great story. It's also not something science has actually proven. And chasing that explanation is probably why you've never fixed the actual problem. The real reason you're waking up at 3 a.m. is stranger, more mechanical, and honestly, more useful to know. Because unlike ancient predator instinct, it comes with an actual off switch. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what's happening in your brain and body at that hour, and the specific thing you can do about it tonight. Let's deal with the popular theory head-on, because it's genuinely everywhere online. The idea, sometimes called the sentinel hypothesis, suggests that early humans slept in short shifts, with someone always semi-awake to watch for danger, and that this evolutionary habit got hardwired into modern humans as an automatic middle-of-the-night waking. Here's the honest problem. This is a plausible-sounding idea, not a proven mechanism. There's no direct evidence tying a specific predator watch gene or circuit to 3 a.m. waking specifically. It's the kind of explanation that feels satisfying because it sounds ancient and primal, but sounds plausible and has been demonstrated are two very different bars, and this one hasn't cleared the second. So if it's not a leftover survival instinct, what is actually going on at that hour? The answer isn't mystical at all. It's sitting in the basic architecture of every single night's sleep you've ever had, whether you've noticed it or not. Your sleep isn't a uniform, unbroken state from lights out to alarm. It's built from repeating 90-minute cycles, and those cycles are not identical throughout the night. In the first half of the night, your sleep is dominated by deep, slow-wave NREM sleep, the heavy restorative stage where your body does most of its physical repair work. But as the night progresses, that balance shifts. By the second half of the night, you're spending much more time in lighter sleep stages and REM sleep, the stage tied to dreaming, where your brain activity actually looks remarkably similar to being awake. Here's the part that explains almost everything. Between every single sleep cycle, your brain briefly surfaces toward wakefulness for a few seconds, something researchers call a micro-arousal. Normally, you're in deep sleep during these transitions. You don't reach conscious awareness, and you don't remember it at all the next morning. But land one of these transitions during a lighter stage, which becomes increasingly likely in the second half of the night, and that brief surface can tip all the way into full conscious waking. That alone would be enough to explain occasional 3 a.m. wake-ups. But there's a second system running on its own separate schedule that night, and when it collides with this one, that's when you get properly, frustratingly wide awake. Your body runs on an internal thermostat, controlled by a brain region called the preoptic area of the hypothalamus, and it drives your core body temperature down by roughly 1 to 2 degrees overnight, a drop that's actually necessary to sustain deep sleep in the first place. Somewhere in the pre-dawn hours, that temperature curve hits its lowest point of the entire 24-hour cycle. At almost the exact same window, your hormones start flipping direction. Melatonin, your sleep-signaling hormone, begins tapering off, while cortisol, your primary wake-up hormone, starts its natural rise, preparing your body for morning hours before your alarm ever goes off. Individually, either of these shifts is completely normal and usually invisible. But land a light sleep micro-arousal at the same moment your temperature bottoms out, and your cortisol is already climbing, and you get a genuinely wide-awake brain at an hour when the room is completely dark and silent, which makes the waking feel far more dramatic and unusual than it biologically actually is. If your nervous system is already running a bit hot from stress, that natural cortisol uptick can push you from briefly surfacing to fully alert and now thinking about your entire to-do list, which is exactly the spiral most people describe when this happens. So if this is just normal architecture colliding with a normal hormone shift, why does it feel like something is actually wrong when it happens? That part isn't really about your biology at all. It's about a specific historical accident that changed how humans think about nighttime waking entirely. Here's where there is genuinely solid historical evidence, just not the predator watch version. Historian A. Roger Eckert's research, drawn from hundreds of diaries, court records, and literary references, found that before artificial lighting became widespread, many pre-industrial societies commonly slept in two segments,
a first sleep shortly after dark, a period of quiet wakefulness lasting an hour or so, and then a second sleep until dawn. The key detail isn't that ancestors had some special predator detection system. It's that this waking period was treated as completely unremarkable. People used it to pray, think, talk quietly with a partner, or simply rest without panic, because nobody had told them it meant something was broken. Once artificial lighting and rigid work schedules pushed the cultural expectation toward a single, unbroken 8-hour block, that same normal midnight waking stopped being second sleep and started being labeled insomnia, a problem to be fixed rather than a known unremarkable part of the night. And that label is precisely what turns a harmless few minutes of wakefulness into an actual sleep problem, because what you do in the next 10 minutes after waking determines almost everything about what happens next. Here's the practical part, and it starts with reframing, because that's genuinely half the battle. Waking briefly between cycles is normal sleep architecture, not a malfunction. The anxiety response to the waking often causes far more damage than the waking itself, because a stress response releases more cortisol, which makes falling back asleep measurably harder. 1. Don't check the time. Looking at a bright phone or clock display does two unhelpful things at once. The light exposure suppresses melatonin further, and seeing the exact time tends to trigger anxious math about how much sleep you have left, which spikes cortisol right when you need it to stay low. 2. Don't immediately fight to fall back asleep. Lying there forcing sleep tends to backfire. If 10 to 15 minutes pass and you're still clearly awake, getting up briefly in dim light, doing something calm and boring, not your phone, and returning to bed once you feel drowsy again mimics exactly what pre-industrial second sleep waking periods looked like, minus the panic. 3. Try a structured breathing pattern to manually lower your heart rate and signal safety to your nervous system. A slow extended exhale, longer than your inhale, something like a 4 count in and 7-8 count out, activates your parasympathetic nervous system directly, which can shorten how long that wakeful window lasts. 4. Manage the room temperature actively, not just the covers. Since your body is trying to hit its lowest temperature point around this exact time, a room that's too warm actively fights that natural process. A cooler room or waking with 1 foot outside the blanket can help that temperature drop complete itself instead of stalling out. None of this requires an app, a supplement, or a sleep tracker. It requires knowing that the waking itself isn't the enemy. The panic about the waking is. So the next time you're staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m., here's what's actually true. You're not broken, you're not being haunted by some ancient predator detection circuit, and you're not failing at sleep. You're a normal human brain surfacing between two completely ordinary sleep cycles. At almost exactly the same moment, your temperature and hormones are naturally shifting gears. Something humans have quietly done for their entire existence, long before anyone decided to be worried about it. If this changed how you're going to handle your next 3 a.m. wake-up, subscribe. I break down what the science actually says. No fluff, no fear-mongering. See you in the next one.